Good evening. This is Andrew at PhysioWorks, and just wanting to get live on Facebook. Haven't been live for the business on Facebook in quite a while, actually. Wanted to talk a little bit about injuries, and in this case, talking about my own injury. Physical therapists get injured, and do we always do the right things? No. Historically, for me, I would say I have not been the best at following my own advice. I often say to patients, it's kind of like the equivalent of seeing a nurse or a doctor outside of the hospital smoking. Just because we know the right things to do, it doesn't mean we always follow the right things. Anyhow, so I've been really working on my running over the last 2 or 3 years, pretty much since the start of the pandemic. Before that, I was swimming several days a week. But with the pandemic came the closure of pools, and basically it gave me the opportunity to get outside and initially hike, initially walk, but then I was doing it with the kids on their scooters and bikes, and I had to start running more. So gradually just started building up and built up decently over that couple of years. And on the 25th of February this year, and I have done a couple of lives about this back around then. On the 25th of February, I was running, and about 1.7 miles in, I felt a sort of a tightness, a pull in the calf, and I knew very quickly that calf was a small tear, and it wasn't going to do very well. I've had them before, so I walked the remainder back. It was about 1.5 miles of kind of walking and limping to get back. And, it was very annoying because I'd had a really consistent period of running without injury, without pain. It was feeling really good. So it was quite disappointing, quite honestly. So, I know sometimes people, go to PT, have an injury, and you kind of, we can't put ourselves in your exact situation, but we can certainly know the feelings that you go through. I also kind of look back to November of last year when I managed to, it seems like I got dehydrated and ended up in the back of an ambulance at the end of a run. And I'm laying there on the stretcher thinking to myself, and then actually asking the paramedic, can I run tomorrow? And then being in the hospital and asking the cardiologist, can I run tomorrow? So, when you lose the ability to do something that you really want, that can be very, very disappointing. So anyhow, not very much fun. I pulled my calf, and I'm just going to make sure that this live is working properly. And it is. That's good. Just check on my phone. But it was very disappointing. I kind of look back and why did it happen? So the big reason, I think, was training error. And we know that like 90% of running injuries are down to training error. So I'd done a long run on the Sunday, which was about a 10K. And then I'd run the Monday, the Tuesday, the Wednesday, and Thursday, just easy mileage. But the run on the Monday, it was going to be rainy. And I really wanted to get that run in. And I made the mistake of going somewhere that was close to home, which was Dublin Park. And even though it was short, I ran it quicker. So I ran a hillier route quickly, and I didn't hurt myself on the Monday. I hurt myself later in the week when that intensity caught up to me. I never really got a good recovery from it. So anyhow, it was a calf strain due to a training error. Really a very common thing. We see a lot of these sort of problems. So basically, how did I go about getting it better? Historically, when I had not been running consistently, I'd maybe jumped the couch to 5Ks and sort of tried to get back to running previously. I'd hurt myself and doing that, and I never really was very good at getting these calf strains well recovered because I wasn't following my own advice. But this time round, I really tried to do what I would do with patients, which I know it sounds like that should be a no-brainer. I actually did do that this time. So the initial rehab for this was making use of a thing called blood flow restriction training. And in blood flow restriction training, we put a tourniquet, in the case of the legs, right around the thighs, just below the groin, and we inflate them. And it basically it traps blood in the leg, and it changes the metabolism of the cells. So basically what that means is that we can create an environment whereby when you lift lightly, you get the effects of lifting heavy. So we know when you've strained a muscle, you need to put load through the legs, you need to put load through the muscles, you need to rebuild that capacity. But I also knew that it hurt, and I also knew that I couldn't take very much load. So that's where blood flow restriction training is a great option. It gives you the opportunity to put something heavier through the leg, something lighter through the leg, but get the effect of lifting something heavy. Close this. Now, what I'm going to do now, and hopefully this is working, I'm going to show you a couple of videos of blood flow restriction training. Unfortunately, I didn't have the foresight to try and do some live videos of me doing it, but I'll switch screens here. This is another athlete that I worked with, Cody, and you can see what I said here. Using blood flow restriction, we get the same strength gains at only 20% of load as we could get using 80% of load without it. So basically, blood flow restriction training lets us load light but get the effects of lifting heavy. So we go through here, you'll be able to see Cody. This is in our old clinic location. He's doing squats, and he's also doing seated calf raises. And in his case, you can say, notice how lighter weights are challenging. He can normally squat close to 300 pounds, and there he's got the bar, and it might be 2 25-pound weights perhaps, so maybe 95 pounds. But basically, we can lift light and get the effects of lifting heavy. So just show you some other exercises that he's doing there. Some bench thrusts hitting the glutes. There's some standing calf raises hitting the gastroc. And basically, I started to do exercises with blood flow restriction hitting the areas that I knew I would use as a runner. So I hit my calf muscles, the gastroc and the soleus. I hit the quads and the hamstrings with a squat, and I hit the quads with knee extensions. If you're kind of thinking, okay, what's the difference? What is the gastroc and the soleus? Let me see if I can pull that up for you. There's a couple of illustrations here. So here we go, gastroc. Where are we? There. So that's the gastroc, and you can kind of see the soleus off to the side here. So the gastroc sits on top of the soleus, and it has two bellies. It's kind of more responsible for force production when you're running faster, or if you're running on heels. And actually, I think that was what I was feeling. It was probably more of it's got two heads, a medial and a lateral head, an inside and outside head. I probably felt a little bit of a medial gastroc strain. That's probably what actually got me. But it looks from that picture like the soleus actually isn't very big. But in fact, the soleus is actually a bigger muscle. So if we cut away the gastroc, we can see the soleus sitting there broadly. So the soleus is a really important muscle for the distance runner. So basically, that is the muscle group that the two muscle groups that I really wanted to focus on, having had a calf strain. I think, like I say, the gastroc was what I'd strained. So if I want to hit the gastroc, I'm going to do standing calf raises off the edge of a step. If I want to hit the soleus more, I'm going to do seated calf raises. And basically, I hit both of those with blood flow restrictions. I hit squats with blood flow restriction, and I hit knee extensions with blood flow restrictions. So that was the initial stages of my rehab. And the other thing that I did, let me get rid of these, is that I started to do a walk-run program. At first, it was like walk 60 seconds, jog 30 seconds, and just rotate through that. And then just gradually, over the course of 3 runs, I started to increase the run time. And I didn't do back-to-back days. I gave myself a gap in between to recover, because when you strain something, if you try and do back-to-back days, you're going to get yourself in trouble. A lot of people, when they have an injury, if they're a decent runner, let's say they're used to running good distances through the week, they get injured and they have to take some time off. And what is their instinct? Oh, I'll just go back and do an easy 1 or 2 miles. And very often that's what they do, and they re-injure themselves. So just a little pro tip there, you've got to go back more cautiously. You've got to gradually build up. So that's what I did. I was doing a blood flow restriction at the clinic here with weights. I was starting to build up slowly. The other thing I did with blood flow restriction training was I got on the trainer, the bike, and with blood flow restriction on, you can do a light, low heart rate cycle or activity. It could be walking, it could be cycling. I did cycling on the trainer, and it helps to improve your VO2 max. So obviously, when you're not running, you're losing aerobic capacity. So I was able to use the trainer with blood flow restriction training to help, at the very least, not lose as much capacity, aerobic capacity, and then over time maybe help to build my aerobic capacity back up. But gradually I was able to build back my running. Well, as I was building back my running, then there were other considerations that we have to sort of pay attention to. And these are things that I talk to my athletes about. Basically, I'm going to switch screens here. You may have heard of heart rate variability, and I'm a big fan of, I'll go back to the screen actually. I'm a big fan of an app called HRV for Training. It's developed by a guy called Marco Cortini, and he's based out of Holland right now. And he's a researcher, and he developed this as part of his PhD. But heart rate variability is a great way of looking at recovery. So if we take our heart rate variability in the morning when you first wake up, it gives you an idea of how well recovered you are. So Marco's app basically looks at just that. It measures your heart rate variability in the morning, and then it links up with Strava or Training Peaks, and it looks and asks you questions about your training, and you can tell it how your training went. It then makes a suggestion of what you should be doing that day, as in how well recovered you are. Should you be proceeding as planned? Should you be limiting intensity, or should you actually be resting? I think we're not always great at determining that. We may think that we're good at knowing what to do, but sometimes we wake up and we're kind of like 50-50. What do we do? Do we go out and push today, or do we need to take it easy? Do we need to stop? We're not always 100% sure. This helps to take some of the guesswork away. So basically what you actually do is you take your phone and you cover up the flash in the camera, and you click measure on the app, and it takes a measurement of your heart rate for 1 minute, and then while it's doing that, it takes a measurement of heart rate variability. You might think, how's it doing that? Like with a camera and a flash, is that accurate? And yes, it is. They've actually validated that against the Polar chest strap, so we know that it's a good way of measuring it. And more recently, they've published data showing how strong a measure of recovery it is. So basically, I'll show you what it looks like. So this is kind of what the measuring screen looks like. This is actually the test measuring screen. So basically, it's measuring my heart rate, and then it will, at the end of that, it will then, if you're measuring in the morning, it will then ask you questions about your workout. So I'll click the next screen. This will show you, it kind of goes through, it asks you about your sleep. And like I say, it links up with your Strava or your Training Peaks, and it asks you about your training. It looks at the time, a distance, and asks you how it went. And it asks you questions about, like, what are your stress levels like? How fatigued are you? How recovered are you? Is lifestyle stable? Were you, what had you been traveling? Had you had an alcoholic drink? So once it's measured the heart rate and heart rate variability, and it's asked you questions, it spits out this next screen that you can see in the middle. And it tells me here that on that day when I recorded, it was 6.8. And it's basically, you can see, I'm going to have to sit forward so I can read this well off the screen. It says your heart rate variability is within your normal range, and your subjective scores are trending positively. Now you can see there that I'm kind of at the bottom end of my range. My range is normally there 6.8 to 7.5. So I'm at the lower part of my range, but it's telling me that I should be able to proceed as planned. Now that doesn't mean you ignore everything else that your body is telling you, but it is telling you that there's that I'm in a decent place. I'm well recovered in the morning. So in the morning, I wake up, I take my finger, I cover the flash in the camera, I record for a minute. The key thing is to do it consistently. You either do it laying down or you do it sitting. I usually go to the bathroom and then sit down and then just take that recording. I answer the questions about my training from the day before, and it spits out this recommendation. Once you've been doing it for long enough, you can then actually it will actually start to produce more data under a section called Insights, and you can kind of see on this next screen what happens there. So we go to Insights and we click OK. Actually, sorry, this is the history. Sorry, let me go back to that a second. I'm going to start that one again. I thought we were showing Insights there when I was showing the history. So, like I said, mine was 6.8 the other day. What you can see is what it looks like over time. So, scooting back here, see some decent training. You can see 2 days there where I traveled, a little airplane sign, and after that, my heart rate variability dropped. You can see when I left to go on vacation, there was a little airplane sign and my heart rate variability had dropped. And then you can see decent training period there, and day where it was lower heart rate variability there in yellow. But then we can go to Insights here, and we can look at other aspects. So when we click here, we can look at our training load. And if we go to the bottom, we can basically see what our injury risk is there. So basically we've got the green ones, which are good, and most of mine are green. My video's going a little quickly there. We can now see how we're also doing another training load measure. We can see, am I coping well? The green is coping well, the grey is stable. If I had yellow or red bars there, that wouldn't be so positive. So at the most simplest, it spits out a little recommendation, as you see in this middle graphic. But in its more detailed form, it can give you a lot of information. And then the last thing here is training polarization. So in this case, it's telling me that 72% of my training is well polarized with a high percentage of workouts performed at low intensity. And basically that brings me on to one sort of final point I want to cover with some other images. Basically, it's a topic called training polarization. And we want to, one thing I've realized through my reading is how beneficial it is to have the majority of your runs being easy. So basically, you may have heard of 80-20, or you may have heard of like the MAF approach, MAF approach. Basically, there's a saying that run slow to run fast. So the majority of your runs need to be easy, and that will have a positive effect on your race pace. And I've worked with some patients recently who historically, I'm just going to go back to my face for a bit so you can see me. Historically, they've probably run the majority of their runs too quickly, and they've got decent times. But when they've actually switched their training up to do 80-ish% easy and 20% hard, they've actually seen a really positive response in terms of how they feel generally, from a fitness perspective, from a soreness perspective, but they've also seen significant improvements in their races. So I've become a big believer of the sort of 80-20 approach. So going back to this graphic that I showed you a little while ago, you can kind of see on it's going to go through each video, so you can't quite see yet. But basically, if we were to go through the end of the video, my training was about 72% polarized. Basically, as I came back from injury, I was trying to keep 72% of my training easy. Now, if you're kind of seeing these images moving on screen right now, they don't make much sense to you. If you were to go back about 3 or 4 minutes, you'll hear me talking about it. But let me get rid of those on screen for the minute. And I want to show you the guy who developed that app, Marco, also publishes an awesome blog that it's worth following. And he committed, having been running for quite a few years, to doing an 80-20 approach. And you can see on this chart from one of his blogs, basically on the left you can see the pace, and at the bottom 4 minutes per kilometer, at the top 7 minutes kilometer. So you can also see the date on the bottom, and the bigger the dot, the bigger the heart rate. So you can see that there was quite a spread of different types of training he was doing. But then you can see here, first low intensity training according to my heart rate threshold. So basically, he said the slowest training of his life, this little dot circled here, that's when he started an 80-20 approach. So he started this 80-20 approach running slower to keep a low heart rate. So that happened. And then you can start to see how the training skewed. On the left, before he started, and you see that little blue dot to the top where he first was his first one, the majority of his runs were not low intensity. Whereas on the right, you can see that the majority of his runs were low intensity. So he wasn't necessarily getting it perfect, but he'd improved what he was doing. Now you might think, okay, well, why would I do that? What's the overall effect? Well, I think this is the screen that really shows it. So basically, what you can see here is on the left, that's where his runs in that black box. That's where his runs were before he started to do an 80-20 approach. They had bigger dots, which means they had a higher heart rate, and they were paced between about 5 and 6 kilometers pace. So they were fairly quick, but they were also meaning he was using his heart very strongly. So when he committed to doing a lower heart rate approach, you can see he had to slow his pace up. It went to a 7-minute pace. And you can see those dots, though, got slower at the top there. So it says started 80-20 running, slow pace, low heart rate is what he wrote there. However, as he continues with that, you'll notice on the right side that arrow shows that his pace started to improve. But the other thing you notice is he was running faster, but those dots still stayed small. Basically, he was running faster for a lower heart rate. So basically, he got a positive training effect. So basically, my goal as I return back into building my mileage has been to try and do the majority of it easy. And there's still, I still get it wrong sometimes. Sometimes I'm not paying enough attention, and I do especially going up hills, I let my heart rate go too high. But the majority of time, I think I'm doing a pretty good job of trying to keep good training polarization. I'm continuing to do strength training, if I can, a couple of times a week, sometimes with blood flow restriction training, sometimes without. And I'm also getting on the trainer with blood flow restriction training in an effort to boost my aerobic capacity, to boost my VO2 max, to supplement my running, because I'm still not running the distances I was running before I was injured. So I'm, 3 months out from injury, and I haven't rebuilt yet to the distances I was running, which I think at the most was about 26 or 7 miles a week or something like that. So I think I'm up to about 16 or 17, but it's slow going coming back from an injury. It's we'd all love it to be a lot quicker. We'd all love it to be a lot easier, just like taking a pill or sticking something in a shoe or taping ourselves or sticking the needle in us. But in reality, to get back from injury, it's a lot of hard work. And, when you sit here in front of me in the clinic, I have a lot of sympathy for that. I've been there, I've done that, I've been there and done it, and I'm doing it again right now. It's not fun. But if you do it the right way, I think if you follow the research evidence, you can definitely make it a smoother and much easier process, and hopefully improve your odds of not having such problems in the future. That's my hope with my injury, that I don't get significant recurrence of it. And so far, it's feeling really good. Like, I think I'm really making a big difference. So hopefully I come back from injury this time and actually end up being a better runner because of it. But like I say, in the past, I haven't always followed my own advice so well. But this time, hopefully I am. So anyhow, If you're online and you've got any questions right now, I'm going to stay live for a few minutes. If you're watching this after the fact, feel free to shoot me some questions in the comments. I'll try and put some links in the comments because we've talked about a few things. We've talked about heart rate variability. We've talked about training polarization. And with heart rate variability, I've shared some stuff from the HRV for Training app that I found very beneficial. I know some of my patients have found beneficial. The guy who developed it, Marco, super guy, very active on Twitter, very active researching this stuff, helping us in the field to have more information of what to do with our clients. And I shared some of the graphs from his blog about his approach to training polarization and his experience. It was really very well presented stuff. So I've shared that. So I'll put some links in the comments there. His app, the HRV for Training app that you'll see earlier in the video, here's $10 for a download. It's a one-off download, and you can choose to be in the research. So they've got, I think, 20 or 30,000 or more participants in their research via this app, which is really very neat. So, I would highly recommend having a look at that. And going back to heart rate variability, you might think, oh, well, my watch tells me stuff. So I know a lot of people's Garmin and the like, they tell them how well they're recovered or what their stress is. But I know talking to my clients and seeing stuff online, there's a lot of people who they're not convinced of how good these measurements are. So, for example, the person who's having a relaxing hot bath and their Garmin's telling them that they're in a high-stress situation. The problem is the watch, it may be recording heart rate variability and using that as part of an algorithm to give you some score. It doesn't know the context of the situation. That's the problem with this, the ones that track 24/7. They may be able to track your heart rate variability over the night and try and give you an idea of how well recovered you are. However, it doesn't know the context of your sleep. It doesn't know whether you've been disturbed by a partner snoring or a kid waking you up in the night. That's the beauty of the app. They've found that actually it's very accurate, just taking 1 minute measurement in the morning when you first wake up. And it really gives you a good idea of how well recovered you are. And if you pair that with your training data from Strava or Training Peaks, you can take it to another level and get a lot more detail and an idea of how well you're recovering and what your risk of injury is, and are you coping well with your training. So I think it's a highly important app for any endurance runner, both recreational and competitive, to reduce injury risk and to help improve performance. So I'll put stuff in the comments about that, and I appreciate you watching either live or if you're tuning in after the fact, and I'm always here for questions. I love answering questions about running and sports medicine stuff, and it really is a pleasure to work with the runners of the Huntsville community and further afield. I get runners coming from Birmingham, Mississippi, Tennessee, a few other different places. So if you're struggling with an injury, or you want to perform better or want to reduce your injury risk, do reach out to me, and I'm happy to chat through some things and to maybe even get you in here for an appointment, look at your running gait, this video analysis, just look at your training as a whole and see what we can do to improve it. Anyhow, well, I'm going to sign off now. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I'll look forward to speaking with some of you in the future. All right, you all take care. Bye.